It's quiet time, but let's talk some spring football insights and Hoops Portal. Going to be fascinating.
Okay, what is it tonight?
Hey, Rutgers Nation. Hope you all enjoyed a fantastic weekend, albeit a little damp, chilly, and rainy. Welcome to New Jersey. Just when you think it's spring, it rolls back to late winter. It's going to be like 40s and some 20s and 30s at night this week. Anyway, hello, my name is Tom. I am the Scarlet Rogue. Let's talk about that. You know, how did I come up with this name? What's a Scarlet Rogue? And it has a simple kind of story for the Jet fans who follow Green Bean on YouTube. I have a similar kind of story where on the NewJersey.com forums years ago, before they did away with allowing comments because it got a little vitriolic, nonetheless would comment all the time on the Rutgers football forums. And it's kind of weird. Other programs, fans of other programs always like to comment on their competitors' forums. And, even with my YouTube videos, I think the most comments I ever got was when we played Wisconsin and Nebraska. They were like lighting up the thread. I guess culturally, socially, it's not something we do a whole lot of around here. But nonetheless, Penn State guys were always commenting on their forum. And to be honest with you, I don't know if this is a Penn State thing, but they were really obnoxious. Rutgers being the little brother, I guess, and we weren't very good. This was pre-2006. And so I'd fire back at them, and I guess they would complain to NewJersey.com and the moderators, and then I would get blocked. It's like, how am I getting blocked? I'm just responding to these guys being obnoxious, and so I'd have to come up with a new screen name. And, we've all used some of the similar sounding screen names, Scarlet Fever, Scarlet Knights, yada, yada, yada. And after the fourth or fifth time, God, what am I going to use now? It just became Scarlet Rogue. I guess being roguish, being bounced off NewJersey.com all the time was kind of a good fit. So I kept that screen name for a lot of stuff, quite frankly. Nonetheless, it's spring football time. Not a lot of news going on, a lot of coach speak, not a lot of meat on the bone to take out of these things. I've watched myself, some of the press conferences, with some articles by Chris Eisman of NorthJersey.com, which is Bergen Rutgers. I'm originally from Bergen County, and I had to get away from the craziness, so I'm out here in Hunterdon now. And, some NewJersey.com insights. And, I watch coaches presser, watch Kirk Shiraka, watch Rob Smith, watched Demir Shore. So, talk some tidbits about football. And, Eisman from NorthJersey.com was talking about how last year's team was the most productive in years. He attributes that to a lot because of the wide receiver room. And yes, it's the best talent we've had a wide receiver probably in 15 years. But it wasn't a super productive room, but we definitely have upside. An improved offensive line. The offensive line was really solid. When was the last time, that happened? And the focus of his article is how Athan brought much needed stability to the quarterback position. And that absolutely, positively is true. Not to mention, Kyle talk about bringing stability. So he feels that this offseason's strategy, the task is clear, that you have to build on that productivity and capitalize on the weapons that we have, and that's easier said than done. Progress is not linear in fashion. Nothing goes in a straight line, whether it's athletics or in real life. You get knocked down, how you respond. Life, there's no straight line in the world. I don't know if any of you guys watch David Goggins, but I do, and he's, you have to. Life is hard, and it's a constant battle, and it's a battle with yourself, battle to get better, and even when you do, there's no end game. You never reach that point where, okay, everything is okay. As soon as you do that, you're done. You just have to keep fighting and scratching and improving. So the improving every day kind of talking points always drives me nuts because, like it went to the gym. Just got back from the gym a little while ago. Some days you hit a personal record, and other days you're not feeling it, and it's a back and forth. The idea is you just got to keep putting in the work, putting in the effort, and keep grinding, and things will take care of themselves. Uh, that being said, we lost key guys, and we have a tougher schedule. We got Ohio State, Penn State, Oregon, Iowa. So there's not going to be this pathway to building on a higher mountain. We can be a better team, and our record might be the same. So, and surprisingly, I should say surprisingly, but not surprisingly, NewJersey.com and Fonseca commented on this. I watched the press conference. Apparently, the backup quarterback battle is tight. It surprises me. Yes, AJ Serace had the mystery upper body in injury. Injuries are a state secret under Greg Schiano. And Johnny Shepard involved in a tight race with AJ Serace, who I viewed as our quarterback of the future, a true dual threat. More on that in a second. Johnny, to me, seemed the perfect fit as a backup to Gavin. Run first kind of guys, make some passes down the field, or check down when you have to. His one, was at the Wagner game, and he looked really comfortable. Okay, it's Wagner. But, there's backups on both sides, and he looked really comfortable running the offense. And I was like, okay, we got something here. Will he be able to throw the ball downfield against Penn State or Iowa, in the third or fourth quarter when the game is tied or we're behind? Not sure about that. AJ Serace, to me, is a true dual threat quarterback. Haven't watched any film on him recently. I did when he first committed. And I think he's kind of the style of quarterback who could run it or throw it with equal amount of fluidity and comfort, like Ethan is the program and scheme fit right now. And it's funny because I don't think Ethan gets credit for being that dual threat guy. People, Jalen, guys like Jalen Hurts considered like a dual threat. Even Gavin, when we first recruited him, I was excited. Oh, this guy's supposed to be a dual threat quarterback. He can run it for sure and has a good arm, but he wasn't a terribly effective passer. And Ethan doesn't get the respect as a dual threat quarterback. So, and then I was talking to Eric a week or so ago about this, Eric LeGrand. We were at the Borgata in Atlantic City for Allied Beverages trade show, and Eric was there with his partner Brian Axelrod, and they were sampling Eric's bourbon. And when we see each other, I'm always talking football with him, and we're talking about a bunch of things. But when it came around to the quarterback position, he was very comfortable with Ethan. And when I said, it's nice to have a guy who's a legitimate dual threat quarterback, Eric said, thank you. Somebody recognizes that Ethan is a dual threat. And he absolutely is. Nonetheless, Coach, as coaches gonna do, said there's a tight battle between the two guys for backup quarterback. The veteran has the lead, and his quote was, "The way I approach it, if you're going to take somebody's job, you got to take the belt from the champ. If he had the job, there's a reason he had the job, so you have to outperform. A tie goes to the incumbent." Yeah, I don't know. Now that all sounds good, but I remember last year in camp when the battle for QB1 between Ethan and Gavin, similar things were said, right? They said the quarterback competition is really close, and I'm thinking, oh my goodness, if Ethan Kalakamanis can't beat out Gavin, I mean, what are we doing here? Now, I know some people thought they were kind of similar. Ethan had little better effective completion rate, yada yada yada. But I watched Ethan's tape, and he was just a much better passer of the football. So when Coach said that, I was like, all right, I guess they gotta duke it out. And then before we knew it, Gavin was transferring. Coach gave him a heads up so he can get into the portal. And Ethan gets the job. And not only that, when he held the press conference, he said after the spring game, and I watched the spring game, he said Ethan was way ahead. Now, a lot of the local media was like, yeah, really? And I thought, Ethan was ahead. Was he way ahead? I don't know about that, but I just thought he was a more fluid, better passer of the football that just looks more comfortable running the offense. So, Kirk Shiraka, we talked about his comments the other day, and, he's got his coach speak lines. We're just trying to grow every day, yada, yada, yada. He's looking for incremental improvement. He said that's what it's really about. Shiraka goes on to say that Ethan's been great and being intentional every day, giving himself an opportunity for maximum growth every day. And, Ethan had some, for as far as Rutgers quarterbacks go, he completed 213 of 395 pass attempts, 54%. I don't know what his effective completion rate was because he had a lot of drops, just like he did in Minnesota. But just under 2,700 yards. And I found this shocking. Not that he was the first Rutgers quarterback to hit 2,000-yard mark since 2015, although it's a little surprising. But if you remember the Chris Ash years, you're not shocked. He was only the fifth player in Rutgers history to pass for 2,000 yards. So, and as an offense, we averaged just under 29 points per game. Apparently, that is the most points per game we've scored since 2008. So if you want to put on the scarlet tinted glasses and say, wow, we missed opportunities last year. We were supposed to be double-digit wins, blah, 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 better offense, more productive receiving room, yada, yada, yada. If you're averaging 29 points per game in your best year since 2008, and it's in the Big Ten, okay, you can make the argument that Kirk Shiraka is making progress. Very process-focused. Coach Shiano is process-focused. These are not guys that come in, change the offense, and all of a sudden you're winging it all over the place and you're averaging 40 points per game like you're a Big 12 team. That's not how they operate. They're going to go about their business building the building blocks. Nonetheless, Kirk Shiraka says there's room for improvement. He learns throughout the season. He watches all, Ethan rather says he learned a lot throughout the season. And I like this about him because I'm like this myself, very self-critical. Some of his quotes were, there's a lot of things he wants back. There's a lot of things he feels that were his fault. I'm really hard on myself. So when I watch those clips and I think about those plays, I just watch them over and over and over again because he knows the situation is going to come up again. He sounds as OCD as I am when I mess something up. So he feels he could have been better at situational stuff. Uh, Nonetheless, to continue that continuity and movement forward, we're losing Kyle. He's generally, I've done 1,000 mocks. Got to do a mock draft kind of thing, being that it's the slow time of the year. And Giants, Jets, not crazy about doing the Eagles. No, I'm not. I don't love the Eagles all that much. Sorry, Mike from the Night Report. But and maybe we'll do some mock draft stuff. Maybe we can focus on, some Rutgers guy and, focus on Jets. You know, I get tired of the mocks. I think guys just post scenarios, passing it off as news, trying to get clicks, and some of it's pretty ridiculous. No, the Giants shouldn't draft Sanders, or the Jets for that matter, because he's a timing and rhythm quarterback that'll fit well in a West Coast offense. Kyle Shanahan play out in San Francisco, not at the windy Meadowlands in December and January. That being said, maybe we'll do some mock stuff, mock draft stuff. It's always kind of fun. Nonetheless, I'm seeing Kyle in that 5th round range. It's a pretty deep class. You're going to be able to find a lot of running backs in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th round who are pretty good. We lose Holland Pierce, left tackle. Great story. Plugged him in. Didn't have to worry about him. He's another guy. He seemed to have worked his way up from 4th round to 3rd round. He seems to be sliding back a little bit now. I don't know why that is. We'll see where he goes. Hopefully he'll be a 3rd round pick. And then Dymere Miller, our most productive receiver in a long time, 59 passes, 757 yards and 4 touchdowns. But I was kind of a little disappointed. I thought we would have more explosive plays for him. And when Kurt Shiraka talked about, when he watched and he saw how different players had different skill sets and strengths, and he saw that Dymere he was really good on the outs and on cut-ins. They kind of switched the offense to play to those strengths, but I don't know how many times this last year, and I said this all throughout the season, how many times on 3rd down did we come up a yard short, 2 yards short on the short little in-cut patterns? I think we needed to get Dymere out in space more explosive plays downfield. I thought we'd average 16, 17, 18 yards per catch with him, averaged about 13. Nonetheless, you have to replace that production. We get North Texas transfer DT Sheffield. He caught 66 passes, 822 yards, and 11 touchdowns. And we also get Florida Atlantic via Florida State. Transfer running back C.J. Campbell. He had 844 yards rushing, 11 touchdowns, and 40 catches for 466 yards and a touchdown in the passing game. So he's a dual threat running back. That's almost like Roger Craig kind of stuff. You OGs out there remember Roger Craig on the 49ers. He'd get 1,000 yards rushing, and he'd get like 80, 90, maybe even 100 pass catches or more out of the backfield. That being said, Coach Shaw talking about the running back room, I got to say he's very expressive with his eyes. It's very Mike Tomlin like. I'm like, wow, that's interesting. It's the first time I've watched him in a presser. He said they watched a lot of transfer running backs, and C.J. Campbell is the only one they pursued. They liked that he can hit the big play, that he can run through arm tackles, and then he showed toughness. Gee, who does that sound like? And he also said, and we know Rutgers and Coach Shiano's big on this, when they spoke to him and heard him speak, they thought he absolutely, positively was a culture fit. And about Antoine Raymond, who's another guy, freshman last year, popped onto the scene. Coach Shaw said his challenge will have to be consistency, because he won't surprise anyone. And quite frankly, you kind of got a deep running back room, and you're going to have to outperform a lot of guys. So, But Coach Shaw also, like Coach Shiano, throwing bouquets at Jay Sean, who has 3 years of eligibility left. You know, they're really pumping this guy up. But again, is there going to be enough touches to go around? Can we get him in some explosive plays? Um, we'll see what happens there. And when we talked about DT Sheffield, losing Dymere, getting DT Sheffield, Ethan said there are similarities between them. They're both like super fast, got really good hands. Their chemistry will develop more as the spring goes on. They kind of did the same the last year with Dymere. The big problem is going to be left tackle. How do you replace Holland? I don't love Tyler Needham coming off the injury. I hate shuffling linemen around. There are those guys like in this year's draft. Gray Zabel is a guy that literally can play every position. Will probably get drafted in the first round as a right guard. But if a guy can dominate or do very well at a position, what do they say about AVT on the Jets? He can be a good right tackle, but a dominant right guard. I like for guys to play where they can dominate, and if they had injuries, switching them around where the balance and the shifting of your weight and power is a little different. I worry about that, and it also says, what's up with the roster depth. So Tyler Needham's been working. Actually, sit by his family. They sit to the left of me in section 124. Kirk Shiraka said, short of getting a guy in the portal, which sounds like they're not going to get a guy in the portal, and you know that left tackles in the portal are few and far between, and they're going to cost a lot. And so it looks like, and he kind of intimated, Kirk Shiraka intimated, will be an internal move. They're counting on their, prospects. They had some highly rated prospects that are in their third year, haven't got a lot of playing time. These guys are going to have to staff up. But if you haven't gotten a lot of playing to date, that's kind of an iffy proposition. They'd be playing if they were up to it, but the pressure is on. So, there are production things we can build on, but with a bunch of new guys and a tougher schedule, like the basketball team, there's no straight line. It doesn't mean you're necessarily going to be successful. So watching what happens with left tackle, how the running back room evolves, how the wide receiving core develops, and will we go to 0 personnel, 5 wides? Will there be some kind of changes adapting to the talent that we have, including pass catcher out of the backfield? Let's see what happens there. On defense, we all know what our issue is there, and that's the pass rush. Hopefully Eric O'Neill and Eric Weaver can join sixth-year Mo Toure. And secondary transfers we had. Cam Miller, Jacoby Henderson. Hope Jet Elad gets his legal troubles out of the way. Yeah. You need the secondary to provide the coverage to allow the front seven to get some pressure. Rob Smith said in his presser that they're going to try and improve their communication where everybody is on the same page and swarming towards the ball. It seems like we're going to have to play, although we have a couple stud pass rushers at a different level with Eric O'Neill and Weaver. But we're going to need some coverage sacks this year. And I think it was Brian Fonseca said, we haven't had 25 sacks in 11 years. That's another thing that's unbelievable. Tight end is a little bit up in the air. They're kind of counting on Colin Weber From Charlotte, 21 catches, 231 yards last year as a receiving tight end. I'm not really counting on that. Sean Bowman, remember him out of Wayne? He had 31 catches for 377 yards. We thought we had our pass catching tight end, and I think he had like 3 catches or 5 catches, whatever it was. Kenny Fletcher is going to have to be better. On to hoops. 2 Rutgers players, other than Tariq Francis from low major, that is NJIT, and his 19 points per game at 6 feet, 180 pounds, who we are apparently interested in, is High Point center Jocelyn Bodo and George Washington forward Darren Buchanan. Now, I know Bodo is gaining a lot of interest. I think he's on campus at TCU recently, and he's got other offers, I think, or at least invites or teams that have contacted him. St. John's. I mean, Jesus, can it be any more disastrous than have St. John's land Bodo? Nonetheless, we were linked to Bodo in the 2023 class before we took Ogboli. He just kind of seems like he's a little better version of Ogboli. He's 7 foot, 240 pounds. Maybe he needs to put a couple pounds on. Average 5.3 points, 8.5 rebounds per game. But I don't mind this. Unlike Tariq Francis at NJIT, who was terrible, that team was just not any good. High Point, which is in North Carolina, they were 29-6. They got to the tournament, first in the Big South. They did lose 75-63 to Purdue in the first round of the tournament. It's a pretty good team. If we could solve part of our issues by having a productive rim protector, at least more productive than we've had, I think this is an ad that can bear some fruit. Now, he's 66.5% shooter. He's very Cliff-like. Inside, that's where he's going to shoot from. He's not Lathan. He's not going to be shooting the threes. And he's not a great free throw shooter. He was a 39.8% free throw shooter year before last. This past year improved to 53.4. What was Cliff? That's very Cliffy-like. Cliff was 55, 56. So he doesn't take threes, averages about 9 rebounds per game and just under 2 blocks. So if he's averaging 23 minutes, he gets some more playing time at Rutgers. He has an opportunity to be more productive. He averages 6.2 points per game. But, I don't love when they step back a little bit. Freshman year, he was great as a freshman, averaged 7 points per game. Last year was 5.3. But the coach is going to love this. 2-time Defensive Player of the Year, 9-time Player of the Week. It's not sexy, but he has Rutgers guy and Coach Michael guy written all over him. So if you want a defensive stopper who can be a little more productive, he just might be the guy. You want to have. He seems like he's going to be somewhere in between Cliff and Ogboli. So George Washington forward Darren Buchanan. There's also a link to Rutgers, which we originally recruited him in 2022. The George Washington Revolutionaries. How great a name is that? The Revolutionaries. It's a mouthful, but nonetheless, 6'7", 235-pounder, averaged 10.6 points per game, 5.8 rebounds, 45.5% field goal percentage. That's pretty solid. 61 games he's played so far, but like Jocelyn, he's better as a freshman. He averages 15.5 points per game, or averaged 55% field goal percentage, 32% from 3, and then this past year, and 63% free throw, which is okay, 6.6 rebounds. This past year, only 10.5 points per game, 45% field goal, and he is in the J. Mike 3-point zone. 17.5% from three this past year. J. Mike last year was 22%. Well, I don't know where we find these guys who can't shoot from three. He did improve his free throws, 66% and 5.8 rebounds. So looks like another defensive guy first who is a guy that can, short mid-range, can shoot pretty well, but don't ask him to do too much from the free throws or from threes. George Washington, though, they were 21-13 in the A10, and I think they were like 8th in their conference, but they did beat, to show you how better they are than NJIT or how bad NJIT is. They beat them by 20 points, 84-64. They lost to Boise in the college basketball crown, whatever the hell that is. The way I see it, these guys are moving towards the Rutgers style, long, athletic, and defense, but they're kind of flawed. Free throw shooting and Buchanan from three. I don't like that they didn't make progress, that they took a step back a little bit their sophomore year. Now there could be other compelling circumstances, but nonetheless, that's where we are with those guys. We'll see. The basketball portal is going to be fascinating. How will Coach be able to rebuild this team? I'm guessing these guys, if you're from High Point, George Washington, it's not going to cost you $1 or $2 million to get a commit. Nonetheless, I'd like to see a little better balance in a wing player. Houston against Florida in the college basketball final. Talk about defense. We talked about Houston. We talked about how Pitino went to visit Houston's practices last year after having a disappointing end to the season last year. He didn't recruit to his strength, which was defense, rebounding, and length. Houston beats Duke in a game where Duke was ahead the whole game, and they were like 2018-19 Rutgers. The last 8-9 minutes of the game, they didn't hit a basket. Both those teams, Houston and Duke, top 5 in defensive efficiency. Florida, top 25. I don't mind that we're going in this direction. Defense first, develop a style, an identity, a core, make the rack great again. So when teams come to play, they're like, oh man, we got to go to the rack. It's going to be loud as hell. It's going to be a rock fight, defensive slugfest. I don't mind that as long as we take the next step and make some progress. And now, speaking of Duke, Duke was after Dillon. Would he have even gotten been in the heavy rotation? He's kind of a finesse, kind of offensive guy. This Duke team was based on defense. It remains to be seen how much playing time Dillon would have gotten there. So maybe in a weird kind of way, it was better for him to be at Rutgers, at least for himself, to showcase his talents offensively and set himself up for the NBA draft. But there you have it. You have teams in the Final Four, the Elite Eight, that were just played great defense. Let's make defense great again. Everybody enjoy the rest of your week. And when you see you the next time, hopefully there'll be some news we can talk about. And thanks again for watching.